An historic day as Ukraine is one step closer to EU membership.
G7 nations are calling for humanitarian pauses to speed up aid to desperate civilians in the Gaza Strip.
Displaced families in Gaza's tented refugee camps struggle to feed themselves as Israel's blockade leaves them cut off from basic foodstuffs. International agencies say 160 children in Gaza are dying every day and hundreds more are being injured in Israeli bombardments.
Ukraine is one step closer to joining the European Union. The European Commission has recommended member states formally open accession talks with Kyiv. Although outstanding work on fundamental reforms needs to be met in the coming months, nonetheless, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said today was a historical day.
It is now 10 years ago that the protests on Maidan started. Maidan protests where people were shot because they wrapped themselves into a European flag. And now, 10 years later, today is a historic day because today the Commission recommends that the Council opens accession negotiations with Ukraine and with Moldova.
In a 150-page assessment, the EU says Ukraine has made significant progress in tackling corruption, the influence of oligarchs on political life, the rights of minorities and the independence of the judicial system, although some more work is required in these areas. Speaking to Euronews, Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister said these issues will be resolved soon and oligarchs would no longer be a problem in Ukraine.
Experts and the leaders of opinion has said oligarchs are officially dead, not from the physical point of view, but as a creation of the post-Soviet transition period. So there are many things to be accomplished, but basically we have been recognized as a country which has overcome this influence, and there is no way back.
The EU strongly commended Ukraine's progress in the midst of the Russian invasion of their country, which created the momentum for theirs and Moldova's membership bid. All 27 member states have to unanimously agree to move Ukraine to accession talks. If all goes to plan, a timeline for starting negotiations would then emerge for early 2024. Shona Murray, Euronews, Brussels.
A pro-Russian politician has been killed in an apparent car bomb attack in Ukraine's occupied Luhansk region. Mikhail Filiponenko's son told local media he died after suffering fatal injuries in the explosion. He was the only person in the car. Filiponenko was a member of the so-called People's Council, a local parliament set up by Moscow-aligned officials. Luhansk is one of 4 Ukrainian regions illegally annexed by Russia after its invasion in February 2022.
The G7 group of rich nations has called on Israel to pause its military offensive in Gaza on humanitarian grounds. At their meeting in Japan, leaders overcame diverging views on the war to issue a joint statement that fell some way short of advocating for a ceasefire. But U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken did say Israel should not try to reoccupy Gaza.
The G7 ministers reaffirmed our staunch support for Israel's right and obligation to defend itself and seek to ensure the attacks of October 7th can never happen again. We all agreed that humanitarian pauses would advance key objectives: to protect Palestinian civilians, to increase the sustained flow of humanitarian assistance, to allow our citizens and foreign nationals to exit, and to facilitate the release of hostages.
The country's foreign ministers also condemned the rise of extremist settler violence committed against Palestinians, which they said undermined security in the occupied West Bank and threatens the prospect for a lasting peace.
They fled their homes without money or belongings and have nothing to put in their mouths. Those displaced by the war in Gaza are suffering a war of hunger on top of the horror they left behind. In this camp, getting one meal a day is mission impossible.
قاعد بولع نار قاعد بعمل برغل عشان أنا وأخوتي ناكل لأنه من البيت ما كلناش.
احيانا ماما لما تيجي تطبخ الاكل لأنا بتوزع الاكل توزيع، واحيانا باخد الرغيف واحيانا بنام بالجوع لانه بضلش خبز.
Families in the camp told Euronews correspondent in Gaza, Nebal Hadjou, that life there is very difficult. They've spent many days without any food, sharing supplies with neighbours in the camp.
وضع الخبز الطحين سيء، وضع المية سيء، ما في أي مساعدات، وضع الصغار سيء، يعني ممكن عادي، يعني ممكن إنك تاكل طقة واحدة في اليوم، بس طقة الظهر اللي هو الغداء، لا فطور لا عشاء، لأنه الظروف صعبة، ما في أي معونات، وإحنا طلعنا الحرب أجت فجأة وطلعنا لا إحنا عاملين حسابها ولا معنا فلوس كفاية.
The blockade on humanitarian aid in the Gaza Strip has left markets depleted. Many families have traded certain death under bombs for a slow death in refugee camps. In Gaza, women and children are at the heart of an unfolding humanitarian catastrophe. According to the World Health Organization, on average, 160 children are killed and hundreds injured every day in the Gaza Strip. More than 4,000 children have been confirmed dead and more than 1,500 are missing, assumed dead under the rubble.
Children now under intense bombardments all day and night. They are lacking food, water, electricity, medicine, everything. And on top of that, without electricity, you can't imagine the horror and fear they are living when it's completely dark and the only sound they hear is just the sound of bombardments.
Families are facing harsh conditions, with the lack of clean water, food and medical care, and facilities such as schools and hospitals overwhelmed. Collapsing and destroyed sanitation systems are increasing the risk of spreading waterborne diseases, including cholera. And what about the longer-term issues of growing up in a war zone?
So we are risking a generation that is not going to be able to be productive adults, not going to be able to interact with their surroundings and be as productive as they can be. They will not reach their full potential. And of course, there's the issue of the cycle of violence, and we're creating violence never is the solution. Violence only produces violence. And I think the sole solution for this is to stop violence and find a solution, a political solution for the conflict.
Last month was the hottest October on record globally, meaning 2023 is almost certainly going to hit a new peak as the warmest year ever recorded. That's according to the latest information from Copernicus, Europe's climate data service. October was 0.4 degrees Celsius hotter than 2019's previous record for the month and follows a record-setting trend over the summer. The real-life impacts of climate change are already being felt, with a fall in olive oil production among the most conspicuous effects on agriculture. Separately, a new UN report reveals that in the coming years, major oil, gas, and coal-producing countries plan to extract more than double the amount of fossil fuels recommended by the Paris Climate Accord. The groundbreaking agreement seeks to keep global temperature rises below 1.5 degrees Celsius. The study says governments plan to produce 110% more fossil fuels than required to stay within that limit. Last weekend's heavy snowfall has been welcomed by many in the Alps. It means some ski resorts are already turning into winter wonderlands. More than 60 centimeters of snow fell at an altitude of 2,400 meters, building up a base layer of snow and kick-starting the season.
Ça fait plaisir, ouais. Surtout que ces dernières années, il y a un peu moins de neige quand même. Ça fait plaisir de retrouver des belles conditions. Ça nous permet de lancer la saison de manière anticipée, ça crée une certaine émulation auprès de la clientèle pour les sports d'hiver et puis ça nous permet de vendre au mieux nos abonnements annuels. On avait besoin de neige, on a perdu 3 mètres de glace cet été encore une fois. Alors on a besoin de neige, après si en cumul il y a 1 mètre, 2 mètres qui tombent rapidement, c'était encore assez chaud, il y avait aussi du gel qui s'est fait, de la glace. Et après ça, on a besoin un peu de temps pour rouvrir les installations et préparer le domaine skiable.
The cold weather is expected to continue for the coming week, with forecasts of significant snowfall.
With their Premier League unbeaten streak recently broken, Arsenal are now turning their focus to the Champions League as they welcome Sevilla to the Emirates this evening. 2 weeks after edging out the Europa League champions in Spain, a win could potentially guarantee the Gunners a passage to the knockout phase with 2 games in hand. Mikel Arteta's men are currently top of Group B, but the Arsenal manager will be without Thomas Partey and Gabriel Jesus, while Martin Odegaard remains doubtful. Sevilla will be looking to get back to winning ways after picking up just 2 points in their last 3 group games. However, veteran defender Sergio Ramos is likely to miss out with a muscle injury. The Spaniards have so far made a habit of drawing since Diego Alonso was appointed as manager and are currently struggling in La Liga as they sit 15th with 11 points from 11 games. In Group B's other fixture, the surprise package loss will aim to continue their fairy tale run in the competition when they lock horns with PSV Eindhoven at the Philips Stadium. Elsewhere, FC Copenhagen host Manchester United, while Bayern Munich could book their place in the knockout phase with a win over Galatasaray. In Group C, Napoli welcome Union Berlin, while Sporting Braga will face a tough trip to the Bernabeu to face group leaders Real Madrid. And in Group D, Benfica will be hoping to secure their first points when they take on Real Sociedad, with Inter and Salzburg facing off in the other game.